All right, so welcome to another shorty episode of Resilient by Design. I am your host, Rebecca Hay, and I'm going to talk today about what to do when a client ghosts you. Ooh, you know what I'm talking about. When you hit send on a proposal and you don't hear a word. When you leave a voicemail, they don't call you back. When someone inquires about your services and you send them your About Us document and you don't hear from them. When you've done a presentation and you're waiting to hear from revisions and the weeks pass on and on with no sign of life.
All right. I'm Rebecca Hay, and I've built a successful interior design business by trial and error, podcasts, online courses, and so many freaking books. Over the last decade, I've grown from an insecure student to having false starts to careers, and now I'm finally in the place where I want to be. Throughout my journey, it's been pretty obvious that I'm passionate about business and helping other entrepreneurs do the same. Each week, I'll share tangible takeaways from my own experience and the experiences of other badass women to help you build your confidence and change your business.
This is what I'm talking about when clients ghost you. You guys know what ghosting is. It's when that boy that you like is not texting you back. Okay, that hasn't happened to me in a long time, but you know what I mean. So there are lots of, first of all, I think we need to talk about the reasons. So there are lots of reasons why a client potentially could ghost you. And I think I just want to get ahead of this because I think this is two things. It's one part mindset and it's one part sales skills. And I'm going to kind of walk you guys through why I think that. Let's start with the mindset piece, because I think oftentimes we make assumptions about what a client is thinking. And I know that because that's been me. I have been the insecure designer who is assuming that the client has not emailed me back because it's too expensive, or they didn't think I was looking actually as professional as they thought I would at the consultation, or they've probably hired somebody else, or fill in the blank. Oftentimes, it's our own rubbish that's inside our heads that is negative self-talk that is making us believe and paint a picture and create a story for our client without actually having any information. Sure, sometimes we might have an inkling, but more often than not, we actually know nothing. They ghosted us. Ghosting meaning they just went and they disappeared into the ether. And so I think it's just catching ourselves when we get into this situation where we get frustrated, or we get self-conscious or frustrated or upset, or we just start to feel self-doubt. Squash that. It's not personal. It's usually business, and quite honestly, more often than not, it has absolutely nothing to do with you. In fact, more often than not, it has everything to do with what is going on in the life of that client. Maybe they just lost their job. Their kid's been sick with the flu. God forbid somebody, there's been a death in the family. Maybe they're on an extended vacation. Maybe this is just such a big decision that they want to make it with their partner and their partner's been traveling for work. Maybe they're a little bit nervous and scared to tell you that the financing didn't come in that they thought they were going to have, and they need to reschedule their appointment with their financial advisor. These are all scenarios that have happened to me in my design business without me knowing. And every time I finally found out the reason, I breathed a sigh of relief. But also there's times where I never found the reason. And I don't know where those people are or what they're doing or why the frick they did not have the decency to at least email me to say, thank you very much for your proposal, Rebecca. We've gone in another direction, or we've decided to put a pin in it, or thank you for following up. Yes, we are doing well and the baby is good, but we're not going to be proceeding with the design. Why are humans not humane sometimes? Do they not know that I'm sitting there stewing? They don't even think about you. And the fact is, unfortunately, a lot of people do not have the decency to send thank you cards anymore, to call you back, or to even just tell you in an email politely that they've decided to go in a different direction. That is going to happen. I can think off the top of my head of at least 3 people in the last year and a half who have not had the decency to let me know they weren't going ahead with us. That's life. And as soon as you can recognize, more often than not, it is not about you, it is about whatever's going on in their life, the better we are all going to be for it. So that was the mindset piece. We all need to work on that. I know I'm numero uno with that, reminding myself that yes, I am good enough. Look at all the amazing work that I've done. Look at these amazing clients who do want to hire me. I need to stop projecting onto these ghosting clients. The second part of this is some sales skills. And I think oftentimes designers get ghosted because they're not following a process, whether it's onboarding or presenting or whatever that phase that they're in with the client, where the client just doesn't get back to them for weeks on end, or if at all, is because you've not outlined a very clear process of how or what it looks like to work with you. Now, that's not going to prevent every client from ghosting, but I can tell you that it will make it a lot easier to avoid that situation. If you are super clear that, okay, let's set a date, a circle back call to review the proposal. How does next Tuesday at 10 a.m. work? Perfect. I'm going to put in my calendar right now. My office is going to send you a calendar invite. I will see you there. I'll send you the proposal. We'll review it on Zoom. That's immediately one sales tactic that you can use to avoid your clients from ghosting you between the consultation and reviewing the proposal. I no longer just hit send on a proposal and send it into the ether via email. I know it sucks. It's a lot more work. It's a lot more effort. You have to actually pick up the phone or schedule the Zoom, and you have to see their face as you go through the numbers. And yeah, I hate it. It's like one of the least favorite parts of my job. But guess what? It's really effective. It is an effective way to read your client, understand if you're meeting them where they're at. Are you too expensive? Are they happy with the contract terms? And lock them in or get a no to your face so that you can move on. And so sometimes we need to remember that just sending things off is not the best approach to sales. But your clients could also ghost you with revisions, right? That's another key milestone where I've seen that happen quite a bit, that they just don't get back to you. And you're like, are we going into implementation? I mean, what's happening here? Like, I thought we were going steady. Things were looking good. Because you haven't, usually for me, it's because I haven't set the parameters. I haven't said, this is when I expect to hear from you. We require revisions this way by this time. And we've probably already shared that with them in our discovery call, at the consultation, at the proposal meeting, when we review everything on Zoom, once again at the presentation or leading into the presentation via email using a what to expect document. If you haven't set the expectation with that client, they are going to probably, you give an inch, they take a mile. Well, it's going to be Christmas. Do you mind if we just keep this over the holidays because our family's going to be visiting? And that's how these things happen. So those are the two reasons that I think ghosting happens or explains it. But now the real meat and potatoes. Are you ready? Drum roll, please. What do you do? What do you do when the client simply hasn't responded? Well, if you're this far along and you haven't done any of the things that I just said, which is have a process and set the expectations and, have great, strong sales skills and get out of your head. It's not about you. It's probably about them. If any of that hasn't happened and you've gotten to a point, or maybe you did all of that and these people are just assholes and they're ghosting you, there are really only so many things you can do. And it is going to depend on what part or what stage of your process in a project that you're at. Because how you react when you haven't heard from them for revisions is very different than how you're going to react if they haven't booked a discovery call, right? At the early stages of your process, if they haven't hired you yet, there's only so much leverage that you have. They haven't given you money. They haven't made a commitment. And so there's only so much follow-up. We have a sequence, an email sequence, and I teach this inside the Power of Process. I teach my onboarding process, but we have a sequence of emails and I share the scripts inside Power of Process. But there's a sequence of emails that we send to follow up with clients after a certain period of time if we haven't heard from them after sending them our About Us document. And in those, we get creative. We often have ways to kind of get in touch with them without being like, just following up again. But ultimately, they might just never get back to you. So you need to have a drop dead point where you're like, okay, this is the number of times I'm going to follow up with them. And at that point, I'm not going to follow up again. Maybe in 6 months' time, I'll circle back and say, hey, just checking to see if you're still, looking for a design firm, or if you're still planning your big reno or what have you. Or, hey, I saw this article and made me think of you. I hope your landscaping project is going well, or what have you. But then you have to move on. You have to let it go. He's just not that into you. But it's a little bit different if now they're a paying client and you have a working relationship together and you can't find them. They've ghosted you. Likely this could happen after you've presented something to them, especially when it comes to pricing. Maybe they can't make a decision. And that's when there could be shit going on in their life, right? I mean, early on, there might be shit going on, but you don't really have a lot of skin in the game. You got a lot of skin on the game this time, because especially if you're full service and you want to implement, you want to make sure you're hearing from them. So you do need to set those parameters. I always recommend, if you haven't heard from them after that strict certain amount of time, you follow up with them right away. Don't let it go, because you give an inch, someone will take a mile, right? And I've just recently been through this with someone ghosting me at the tail end of a project, and I'll share that in just a minute. But you want to make sure that you get, you nip it in the bud if you can. So you reach out to them, you either pick up the phone or you send them an email, or you try to schedule a Zoom call. Hey, I'd love to talk about revisions and make it feel less formal. I haven't heard from you. I hope you've had enough time to look through this, yada, yada. And then give them a drop dead date. Give them a drop dead date, or a date and a time where you're going to meet them on Zoom. And then tell them, after this date and time, we are going to assume, if we haven't heard from you, and this is what I've done in the past, it's really helpful. If we haven't heard from you, we are going to assume that the design is approved and we're going to move on into the implementation phase. Or if you don't have an implementation phase, you could say, if we haven't heard from you, we're going to assume that means that you're happy with the design and you approve the design, and therefore we will close this phase of the project. Let them know that there's something for them to potentially lose if they don't get back to you. And then if you still don't hear from them, close the project. Now, if there's money involved, that's a whole other ballgame. We'll get to that in a second. Close the project. Let them go. Move on. Literally not worth the mental drain, the headspace. Working with people can be the hardest part of running a business, whether it's suppliers, trades, employees, independent contractors, freelancers, or clients. That is, in my experience, has been the most difficult part of running a business, has been the people. And some of you might disagree. You might find that the best part. Well, good for you. So what happens if they're ghosting you when it comes to money? And this is when it gets kind of more serious and a little bit more frustrating, and we start to get really taking it personally and get really upset. And so I recently had a situation with a very large client, a company, really, in fact, and they just ghosted and stopped responding to our request for them to pay our invoices. So what do you do if this happens? So I've had this actually happen more than once. I'm not proud to admit it, but it is the truth. And I think it's important to give you guys the reality. And oh my God, I just realized the time. This is supposed to be a shorty episode, so I will wrap this up real quick. But I think it's important to hear this message. Early on, I had a client, my first client, who just skipped town, if you will, and didn't pay. I made the mistake of not collecting my money or my fees up front. And so I was billing hourly. I did not have a retainer at the beginning that I held till the end like I do now. And so what happened was I presented, and then I was chasing this guy for months, up until a year, for him to pay the invoice. It wasn't enough money to take him to court or get a letter or anything like that. But I remember learning from that lesson that get my money up front before I give a deliverable. What happens if you have money up front and now you've blown through it? This is what happened to me. We've blown through the retainer, meaning that we don't use the retainer at the beginning. We start billing. It's rare that I charge hourly. I'll just be very clear. And I talk about this inside Pricing with Confidence. So go get that course if you're curious about how I structure my design fee. I don't think you have to do it my way, but I think it's helpful to see how other people do it. And essentially, I was acting in good faith, was continued to pay my team to work on the project. 1 month passed. They were giving us excuses. 2 months passed, more excuses. And by the 3rd month, I looked and I realized that if I applied the retainer, it didn't cover the time that we'd put in and that I had now paid for my team and this client hadn't paid. And so it was emails until it became phone calls, until it became physically going in person to the office to find out what the heck is going on. And so at that point, you have a choice. I have a choice. Do we engage a lawyer to serve them with papers and go to small claims court, or do I write it off? One thing I can tell you that was really helpful for me is that in my contract, I let clients know that if an invoice goes past 30 days unpaid, we do bill interest. So we'll add interest on. And so what we've been doing is we did we did charge interest. So the fee that they owe us is much greater. Ultimately, unless you're going to take legal action, you can't force someone to pay you. I've had other situations in my life where I had to let the money go, and it was a choice that I made because my mental sanity was worth more than the $10,000. And I know that some people get caught up in it's the principle of it. And I get that. But I'm a glasses half full kind of girl. I want to keep moving forward. I want to grow my business. I want to have multiple businesses. I want to be successful. And if I let this one person drag me down and take up so much mental time, it's going to affect my ability to succeed in other areas of my life. Now, that's a personal choice and everybody is different. Ultimately, all that to say, I've given you examples of all sort of beginning, middle, and end of a project where clients could potentially ghost you. They could ghost you at any time. I would think the majority of you listening have had clients ghost you at the beginning because that's when there's sticker shock. Some people are just tire kickers and they're not. So get super duper duper clear on what your onboarding process is. And if you don't have one, take Power of Process. You guys can use mine, but get an onboarding process that is super clear so that you are pre-qualifying clients. So you don't get in that situation of wondering, where did they go? Where are they? Did they do the project? Maybe I'll drive by their house and have a look and see. I know you've done that. All right. I hope that episode was helpful. Let me know. Shoot me a DM on Instagram. I would definitely love to hear if you guys are enjoying these shorty episodes. I love you guys, and I'll see you soon.